Got to know this Jesus well. Got to know this Jesus well. Got to study and pray, got to walk in his way. Got to know this Jesus well. Coming from Northeast Ohio, I can tell you that one of the things that I get genuine satisfaction from is when LeBron James gets an assist for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He passes the ball excellently to his team member who is in position and goes on to make a basket. It's like that and the teamwork in Jesus' gospel movement. We assist the Spirit of truth as another human being is approaching, making, or confirming the most important decision that a person makes in this life. By the end of this talk, I want everyone to know how to assist in the gospel movement. I have some general principles to propose and some examples of how to do things, but don't imitate me. Just use my stories to stimulate you to be a living prophet in your own way. When I visit different churches, my favorite question to ask people is, what does it mean to you to be a son of God, a daughter of God? I get the most wonderful variety of answers. If I go to door to door, I simply say, I'm your neighbor Jeff, encouraging you in the faith that you are a son or daughter of God. And then I fall silent with a smile and let the other person respond. The conversation goes forth naturally from there. Sometimes at a toll plaza in the highway, I will ask the person who is taking my money, could you please give me directions to heaven? I usually get a nice smile and a sympathetic comment. Countless times I have said to people, you are a divinely created, infinitely loved, spiritually indwelt, evolutionary, free will son or daughter of God. People have been converted by that line alone, I tell you. If someone asks me about myself, I sometimes say, my motto is that God is our Father and I'm your brother. Jesus' gospel is many-sided, and each side is a truth that ministers to some essential spiritual need. When you collect and study the dozens of statements of the gospel in the Urantia book, you see that the gospel is a living reality. It cannot be systematized. I once published what I thought, and still think, is a pretty good list of 7 truths. A week ago, I wrote down 12 major themes, each of which is brimming with potentials for spiritual realization and teaching. The fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the spirit within, love, faith, eternal life, joy and liberty, the will of God, prayer, worship, and service. But each of these is just an idea in the mind until the Spirit quickens it. Our faith starts small. It starts with just believing. How do we come to believe? Often it goes like this. We hear someone expressing spiritual truth. The Spirit adds emphasis to it, and our mind recognizes it as intuitively true. Truth is a gift, our intuition is a gift, and faith is a gift. But faith is living and it grows. What we receive as a gift, we exercise in action. Later, we find our own way to give voice to truth. With practice, we become comfortable and skilled. How shall we do this work? I'm going to give you two methods. They both involve study and experience. The first method has, whoops, did I just turn that off? Come to me. The first method has 3 essentials. There's the first one, soak in the truths of the many-sided gospel. The first essential is to study Jesus' many-sided gospel experientially in order to find the spirit of truth in the gospel. Here's one experiential method for finding the spirit of truth. Select a quote in which Jesus says what the gospel is or what the kingdom is. Ponder it. Stop and ponder. Let it sink into your mind and heart and soul. Reflect on it intellectually. You may find added meaning in some of the terms by associating them with other teachings in the Urantia book. Take some time in silence to allow the Spirit to bring home to you the truth of this teaching. The experiential part also involves putting this truth into practice in your daily life. If you have a study group that is willing to do this with you, commit to reporting your experience back to them and see how teamwork can multiply your effectiveness. Then repeat this process with other teachings that highlight different sides of the gospel. Let's take the truth of the fatherhood of God. Maybe when we read this or hear it, it seems a little flat. We've heard it a million times and we've become inoculated to it, but we know that there's something more in there. Jesus said, "In the gospel of the kingdom there resides the mighty Spirit of truth." And he said that the Spirit of truth is just like me except for this material body. So we know that with some spiritual digging, we can break through to that power and conviction. Let's begin our experiential study. Here's a quote that we can use. Jesus says, "Simply go forth proclaiming, God is our Father and you are His sons, and this truth, if you wholeheartedly believe it, is your eternal salvation." Doesn't sound flat anymore, does it? First of all, if we want to know God as our Father, we have to relate to Him as a son or daughter. So there we are, caught up in contemplation, in relation, in the awe and wonder. We can hardly speak or think because we're moved out of mind into soul, which craves and initiates worship. When I want to refresh my relation with the Father, I often recall the first paragraphs in paper 1. The universal Father is the God of all creation, the first source and center of all things and beings. And then I'm ready for the first lesson on thinking. First, think of God as a creator, next as a controller, and last as an infinite upholder. The Creator doesn't just throw out chaos. He controls his creation by ordering it according to inherent laws of matter, mind, and spirit. But these are not just laws that we can run into like a physical brick wall. There are also laws of duty. And the Father rules a universe of universes by the compelling power of his love. Our failure to live in accord with these laws could be the end of us, but the love and mercy of the infinite upholder guide and rehabilitate imperfect creatures for the eternal adventure. As human beings, we can know God, receive the divine affection, and love him in return. This is the primary circuit of love. We need to take time to allow the Father's love to come in, and then we love him back. By this time, the truth of the fatherhood of God is beginning to sing. It's beginning to shine brightly. It is no longer simply a fact for us, though it is a fact. We have found the Spirit of truth in it. Then we are ready for our first lesson on feeling. God-knowing creatures have only one supreme ambition, just one consuming desire, and that is to become as they are in their spheres, like him as he is in his paradise perfection of personality and in his sphere of righteousness, universal sphere of righteous supremacy. God loves everyone. If we are to become like him, we allow ourselves to be filled with an overarching attitude of love, and then we undertake the evolutionary adventure of getting to know people and learning to love them. The second essential of gospeling is get to know people well, discover their spiritual difficulties, and learn to love them. This is one of the privileges of the brotherhood of man. As a master teacher, Jesus did an awesome job of getting to know people, and he blazes the trail for every one of us. If we give teaching in answer to a question that the other person is not asking, we are wasting our breath. We have to get to know the questions they are asking, what their concerns are, and what difficulties they are coping with. I quote, "Now that Jesus has personally left the world, he sends in his place the Spirit of truth, who is designed to live in man and for each generation, to restate the Jesus message so that every new group of mortals to appear on the face of the earth shall have a new and up-to-date version of the gospel. Just such personal enlightenment and group guidance as will prove to be an effective solvent for man's ever new and varied spiritual difficulties. The more our minds and souls are filled with the truths of the many-sided gospel, the more we know the individuals and groups we speak with, the easier it will be for Jesus' Spirit of truth to bring forth particular truths to bless them. The third essential of this method is make an effective connection between appropriate gospel truths and others' spiritual difficulties according to their capacity of receptivity. Here's the quote from Jesus: "Be wise in your choice of methods for presenting the good news to the different races and tribes of men." All the apostles taught the same truth, but each of them did it in his own way. Find your way, your language. Jesus told them not to quote the prophets of old, nor to teach about him or about his teachings, but to be a living prophet. Here comes the second method. First method is how do students of the Urantia book do this? Second method is how did Jesus do it? Jesus, the master teacher, was the truth that he taught, and how he taught was perfectly unified with what he taught. How did he achieve this? He grew up in a balanced way. We learn how in papers 123 through 129, covering from Jesus' early childhood to his later adult life. If we will engage in the experiential study of these papers, we can do what I call growing up with Jesus. So this is the second way, as accessible to ourselves. Everyone can do this. I quote, "Although the average mortal of Urantia cannot hope to attain the high perfection of character which Jesus of Nazareth acquired while sojourning in the flesh, it is altogether possible for every mortal believer to develop a unified personality along the perfected lines of the Jesus personality." The unique feature of the Master's personality was not so much its perfection as its symmetry, its exquisite and balanced unification. Jesus unifies life, ennobles character, and simplifies experience. He enters the human mind to elevate, transform, and transfigure it. It is literally true, if any man has Christ Jesus within him, all things are becoming new. Here's how we grow up with Jesus. As we read one of these key papers, we observe Jesus' development. We notice aspects of his character that we would like to strengthen in ourselves. So we design an experiential project to do so, finding activities that would enable the growth to take place in ourselves. It is very helpful to do this with a study group, as I discovered this year with the Urantia Young Adult International Study Group, initially hosted by Antonio Schaefer and now hosted by Sam Nyor. I was ready for a transformative experience, and this was it. After decades of study, I realized for the first time that Jesus' gospel was the truth that he naturally realized just by growing up in a beautifully balanced way. His gospel is the deep truth of the life we are all living. And I saw the principle of receptivity that he later taught his apostles, emerging naturally out of his earlier life. More on that later. I have selected 8 principles to mention this morning. Number 1, in the paper on Jesus' early childhood, the first developmental thing we read was about Jesus socializing. I need growth in this area, so I made a project of it, went for it totally, made a number of quick breakthroughs, and continue my growth. Number 2, a little later in the same paper, we see a reference to the first personal and wholehearted moral decision that Jesus made. I thought to myself, how many of my moral decisions have that personal and wholehearted quality to them? I thought of the functions of cosmic mind, causation, duty, and worship, and realized that a personal and wholehearted moral decision is rooted in an adequate understanding of the factual, material, causal, evolutionary setting, and also illuminated by the spiritual value that the will of God is wanting to actualize in my action. I started making new and wholehearted personal decisions and refreshing some old decisions that needed an upgrade. Number 3, Jesus participated in the religious life of his people. In the Judaism of his day, he found truth to inspire him, and he emphasized the gems. But he also found other teachings and practices that he would ignore or learn to tolerate, modify, or challenge when the time was right. When he taught the first 6 apostles, he did not just teach them the new gospel of the kingdom, he also led them in the study of the scriptures. I thought, how often do students of the Urantia book study the writings that are most important spiritually to the people that we aspire to work with? I began looking for scriptural gems in the church bulletins that I would get from week to week, and I underlined the gems in those bulletins and tore them out after the service was over, and I keep them by my computer. Number 4, Jesus was an outstanding student. Even in his later adult life, when he was working in Capernaum, he found a lot of books that were new to him in the library at the synagogue and spent 5 nights a week in intense study. Number 5, Jesus went to extraordinary lengths to get to know people well. He was a master teacher by the end of his adolescent years. Pay attention to this quote. Born into the world as a babe of the realm, he has lived his childhood life and passed through the successive stages of youth and young manhood. He now stands on the threshold of full manhood, rich in the experience of human living, replete in the understanding of human nature, and full of sympathy for the frailties of human nature. He is becoming expert in the divine art of revealing his Paradise Father to all ages and stages of mortal creatures. Notice this phrase, all ages and stages. The stages are early and later adult childhood, the crucial in-between years, adolescence, early manhood, and later adult life. But note that the term adolescence does not refer, as we use it so often today, to the in-between years. Adolescence literally means becoming an adult. It involves settling down to acquiring the knowledge, skill, and character achievements necessary to function as a responsible man or woman in the society. And notice that ages and stages do not necessarily correlate. People can be 50, 60, 70, and still not attain the maturity of an adult. We speak differently to people at different ages, and we speak differently to people in different stages. Jesus, the master teacher, could reveal the Father in a way that was simultaneously responsive to both variables. This is what I call scientific living. We should not be overwhelmed by his achievement, but simply start being more attentive, perhaps studying a bit more, and spend a little while thinking about these different groups. Notice that in his later adult life, again, during that first year at Capernaum, Jesus spent one evening a week with the younger ones and one evening with the older ones. 6, the most important principles of teaching, in my opinion, are to whet appetites and promote discovery. Jesus did that partly by giving his teaching in small doses. 7, Jesus grew up gaining experience in personal ministry before beginning his public ministry to larger audiences, mass media. And he had his apostles follow the same sequence. Number 7, Jesus said, all believers in the kingdom should pray sincerely for the extension of the kingdom of heaven. Number 8, Jesus also whetted appetites so that people came to him with their questions by his truth-coordinated living, integrating scientific living and spiritual living in his beautiful wholeness of righteousness. Here's the quote with major implications for how we are to attract new readers. In all that you do, become not one-sided or over-specialized. The Pharisees who seek our destruction verily think that they are doing God's service. They have become so narrowed by tradition that they are blinded by prejudice and hardened by fear. Consider the Greeks, who have a science without religion, while the Jews have a religion without science. And when men become thus misled into accepting a narrow and confused disintegration of truth, their only hope of salvation is to become truth-coordinated, converted. Let me emphatically state this eternal truth. If you, by truth coordination, learn to exemplify in your lives this beautiful wholeness of righteousness, your fellow men will then seek after you, that they may gain what you have so acquired. The measure with which truth seekers are drawn to you represents the measure of your truth endowment, your righteousness. The extent to which you have to go to the people, go with your message to the people, is, in a way, the measure of your failure to live the whole or righteous life, the truth-coordinated life. There are additional resources that I have to offer you. You've got an email address for me. You've got the name of my new website. In about a month, maybe add a week, I expect that my book, Living in Truth, Beauty, and Goodness, will appear at Cascade Books. This book can be well described as a book about truth-coordinated living and how it leads through experiential, project-centered education to the beautiful wholeness of righteousness. It's not written for philosophy scholars. It's not written for theologians. It's written for folks like us. The only URL, of course this is the hardest one to write down, but here it is. This one has all the other links and information that you're going to see coming up on the page. But it's, well, you've got it there. UB Questions and Studies. I have materials there for my Internet Gospel School, plus a newly expanded section on how to share the Urantia book wisely. I want to draw your attention last to the upcoming module of the study group I referred to earlier. Beginning July 2nd, we will undertake the experiential study of advanced teachings on prayer, worship, and service, all with an eye to gospeling. Although I am the primary teacher, Antonio Schaefer is the host and the person to contact. His email, which you can also find at the Google site, is conference@trinitate.org. Trinitate spelled T-R-I-N-I-T-E-I-T. Trinitate, T-E-I-T is the end of it. One more resource stands before. If you are thinking of getting some education, more education, to prepare yourself to assist in the gospel movement, I want to talk with you.